From an early age, I was convinced that I would meet the one woman with whom I would spend the rest of my life, just like my parents. However, at a young age, I didn't realize how much marriage is a job that requires tremendous effort to maintain. Having made my choice, I am ready to share my story. I can't call myself a perfect husband. The demands of my job often leave a mark on my mood, especially when I get home. Although I am not a millionaire, we live well. Our beautiful home has 2 luxury cars. My wife Virginia has a closet full of exquisite outfits, and our daughter Deborah has many expensive toys. Our marriage of almost 12 years has been a generally prosperous one, but lately I have sensed a certain uneasiness between Virginia and me. My wife's behavior in recent months had become strange and aloof. She was inexplicably criticizing my actions and words, which was not her custom. I tried to discuss it with her, asking if something was wrong, but she brushed it off as tiredness or a bad day. At first I thought time would fix things, but her detachment only intensified, bringing frustration to our relationship. In addition to her altered behavior, every married couple knows that relationship problems are often reflected in the intimate realm. Despite my efforts to keep the fire of passion and spontaneity burning in our love life, Virginia's reaction to my romantic gestures changed. Previously reverently perceived signs of attention were now responded to with a simple thank you and a kiss on the cheek. She began to see my expressions of affection as awkward attempts to make amends. Virginia began to avoid intimacy, inventing various excuses, and in those rare moments when she did agree to get closer, I felt her detachment, causing me one-sided disappointment. In desperation, I began to distance myself, limiting myself to minimal attention to Virginia. Anxiety and worry led me to reflect on exactly when these changes began, looking for possible triggers that provoked them. A disturbing thought arose in my musings. Had Virginia begun to cheat on me? I dismissed the thought of betrayal for a moment, convincing myself that Virginia would never have broken our marriage alliance. However, driven by curiosity, I began to scrutinize the signs of possible infidelity. Inconsistencies in behavior, dress, and daily routine that I had not previously noticed. Virginia began to dress more provocatively, but my brief encounters with her were not enough to judge her usual attire. Her schedule remained a mystery to me, for she was constantly on the road somewhere. Her altered behavior seemed to match the common signs of infidelity. The thought of hiring a private investigator crossed my mind, but the lack of conclusive evidence made me abandon the idea. Determined to act on my own, I began my own investigation. Calling home at unexpected moments, installing an old surveillance camera under the eaves of the garage connected to a hidden recorder. My goal was to identify any unfamiliar cars near the house, but for 2 weeks I found nothing suspicious. Watching Virginia occasionally leave the house, claiming to have spent the entire day in it, I found no evidence of her infidelity unless her alleged partner was unusually quick. These actions were inconclusive, mere hints that fueled my growing suspicions. As time went on, my concern grew. Her behavior deteriorated, and our intimacy waned, leaving me disappointed as our 12th anniversary approached. I saw an opportunity to bring some joy back into our marriage in an effort to rekindle the spark. I planned a party for our daughter to stay the night at my parents' house for unlimited fun. Got a table at Virginia's favorite restaurant. We headed out into the evening. I was filled with anticipation, walking hand in hand to our table. I hoped the magic of the past would return. But something was a little tense over dinner and a bottle of wine. Virginia gradually relaxed, resembling her old self. Our conversation became light and playful. After dinner, she seemed eager to hit the dance floor. I suggested a new club, but Virginia convinced me to return to our usual establishment catering to an older crowd with dance music. Once we were on the dance floor, we regained the joy of our earlier years. After almost an hour of dancing, however, we returned to our table for a break. While Virginia excused herself and went to the restroom, I anticipated the intimate continuation of our night as I watched her graceful movements. For a moment, I was immersed in Virginia's charms, but soon noticed that I wasn't the only one captivated by her beauty. In a corner of the hall, someone else seemed mesmerized by her presence. On the opposite side of the dance floor, I noticed an attractive young man who was scrutinizing Virginia's every move. For a moment, I was curious if they knew each other. As Virginia headed for the bathroom, I couldn't convincingly tell if they knew each other. After all, the place was just a dance club. I wondered why the man was here alone, assuming that his female companion might also have been in the bathroom as Virginia was. When she returned, they seemed to exchange smiles and glances. My suspicions boiled to the surface. Virginia asked for another glass of wine, and I felt bad leaving her alone while I ordered drinks at the bar. Signaling to the waitress, I sensed the evening was taking an unexpected turn. Watching the guy still sitting alone, I couldn't contain my curiosity and asked Virginia about him. She seemed shy at first, but quickly pulled herself together, insisting she knew nothing about him. As soon as the drinks were brought to us, Virginia glanced over my shoulder. Mr. Lone, isolation personified, was slowly approaching our table. Disregarding my presence, he directly asked Virginia to dance. In response, I firmly expressed my refusal, eliciting a derisive reaction from him. I objected that he should mind his own business, emphasizing that Virginia was my wife and I expected her to dance with me. Virginia's intervention sounded irritated. When Mr. Lonley tried to enter into conversation, I interrupted him, expressing my irritation. Virginia defended her right to choose her dance partner with unexpected vigor, claiming that she was not my property. Her disrespectful behavior sent a wave of anger through me, shattering all hopes of a pleasant celebration of our anniversary. "Watching you dance with someone else is no pleasure to me," said I, especially after I asked you not to dance with him. "You're right, I don't own you and I can't forbid you from dancing with him. However, if you do decide to dance with him, think about the fact that maybe he should take you home." Thoughts of walking away after 12 years together flashed through my mind. I knew Virginia well and could read her emotions like an open book. When she looked at me, anger was reflected on her face. "We'll discuss this later," I said. The man she was about to dance with grinned triumphantly as Virginia took his hand and they headed for the dance floor. I decided to leave the venue, and while already being a few blocks away, my cell phone rang. It was Virginia, and she asked with remorse in her voice about my whereabouts. I replied that I was on my way home to pack, not intending to explain myself. Virginia insisted on the details, not understanding why I was leaving over a simple dance. I bitterly expressed my disappointment, saying that that was enough and it was time for me to leave. She expressed doubts about my seriousness, to which I emphasized that it was not about the dance, but about her actions which expressed a lack of love and respect for me. I suspected her of infidelity based on their interactions on the dance floor. Virginia tried to defend herself by assuring me of her love and denying any connection to this man. But I pointed out that her carelessness about our relationship, lack of intimacy, and general behavior called into question her sincerity. Despite her pleas, I remained adamant in my decision to end the relationship and convinced her that she could believe anything. In desperation and apologies, Virginia begged me to return, promising a quick cab ride and asking me to wait. Her words, however, sounded unconvincing. I left, turning off my phone and watched from afar as she returned home in a cab. This incident only increased my suspicions, and the next day I decided to hire a private investigator. I asked my coworkers to keep Virginia out of the office so the detective could discreetly conduct his investigation. It became a waiting game. Virginia tried to contact me, but I was adamant about waiting for the investigator's findings. My friend Andrea expressed concern about my suspicions of Virginia's infidelity, claiming that she was just dancing with a man and my fears were unfounded. I explained that Virginia's strange behavior over the past 2 months and the incident that night only confirmed my concerns. Andrea, having been our neighbor for many years, assured me of Virginia's loyalty, noting that she had never seen any signs of her infidelity. Nevertheless, I decided to wait for the results of the private investigator's investigation before taking it up with Virginia. I asked Andrea to let Virginia know that I needed time to think things over, and I would contact her in a couple weeks. Eagerly awaiting news from the detective, I eventually received a call to his office. To my surprise, my heart squeezed when the detective handed me the report. It refuted all my suspicions about Virginia's infidelity. Although I was relieved, in the back of my mind there was still uncertainty about the thoroughness of the investigation. The detective assured me that he had followed Virginia closely and found no evidence of an affair. Relieved and grateful, I left his office and returned to my motel room. I spent the entire evening and Monday morning pondering. When I finally called Virginia, her voice shook with apology and remorse. She acknowledged her mistake and her lack of respect for our relationship. Her tears and sincerity made me rethink our relationship and the possibility of giving it another chance. "Yes, I'll be back," I affirmed, but on the condition that we would have to go through a trial period. I expressed my desire to get back the woman I had fallen in love with and married. Virginia seemed to be sincere in her response, affirming that the woman I longed for was still here. However, I was still hesitant, remembering the problems we had encountered, including bad attitudes, lack of passion, and disrespect. I informed Virginia of my intention to pick up my things from the motel after work, but assured her that I would return home that very night. She warmly professed her love for me, apologizing for her previous behavior and acknowledging her mistakes. Despite those assurances, I still harbored doubts and anger, and I couldn't completely dismiss the suspicion that Virginia might have known the man from the dance hall. 2 years later, our family life began to improve. Virginia was once again the woman I married, restoring our emotional and intimate closeness. She surprised me with a birthday party and organized a wonderful celebration of our 14th wedding anniversary. Despite residual doubts about her fidelity, I found comfort in the renewed warmth of our relationship, especially after a cold winter in Chicago. Encountering spring with gentle April rain made Virginia nostalgic and reminded her of our moments together. One morning, Virginia met up with her old friend Kathy. They had a fun time reminiscing about days gone by and discussing their children. But the conversation took an unexpected turn when Kathy revealed her thoughts about her affair with a man named Cody. When Virginia learned of Kathy's affair with Cody, she realized how it could have affected her friend's marriage. With concern and caution, she encouraged Kathy to rethink the risks and consequences of her decisions. Over the past 2 years, I have tried to keep my thoughts about Kathy private, not wanting to divulge my views on her choices. Virginia decided to take a risk and open up to Kathy by sharing a hidden part of her life. Kathy recalled a time when Virginia and her husband Gerald had problems, but Virginia never went into detail. Seriously and insistently, Virginia asked Kathy to promise to keep what she was about to share a secret. Kathy assured her friend of her silence, realizing the damage it could do to Virginia's marriage. After receiving a confident promise of confidentiality from Kathy, Virginia continued. She confessed that after 12 years of marriage, she felt bored and stuck in a routine. Life seemed monotonous, and she began to question her path in life, despite her love for her husband, Gerald. Virginia felt that she was missing something in her life, which led her to a state of mild depression. Virginia met Justin and explained to him that their relationship was more of an emotional affair that began before it turned into something physical. She admitted to the excitement that came from their flirtation, acknowledging her vulnerability and guilt. She shared the story of how she'd gotten Justin's number and the inner conflict she'd felt as she pondered whether she should call him. Kathy, listening intently, recognized strangely familiar moments in Virginia's story. Virginia recognized that her actions were wrong and described the vulnerability she felt. Despite convincing herself not to call Justin, Virginia could not contain herself, which led to an arrangement to meet for lunch. Kathy listened with fascination to the story of the emotional turmoil and temptation Virginia faced. My friend took another sip of coffee before we continued on to the restaurant. My emotions were mixed. There was terror, excitement, and, I must admit, a certain trepidation. On our date, Justin leaned across the table and took my hand, creating a first date atmosphere. Despite my strong desire to be with him, my conscience and fear held me back. However, Justin had already begun his seduction, talking about how Gerald didn't appreciate the wonderful woman he had. I found myself suddenly resenting Gerald and felt victimized by Justin's persuasive words. Kathy, concerned about my new acquaintances, cautioned me about the man I was dating and wondered if he had mentioned someone named Bruce. To my negative response, Virginia insisted on caution, emphasizing the importance of being aware of potential consequences. Virginia continued her story, recounting how lunches with Justin had made her struggle with her loyalty to Gerald. During their third lunch, Justin almost convinced her to go to his house. Virginia sensed his frustration with her excuses and realized that another meeting would probably lead to an affair. She also mentioned her upcoming anniversary with Gerald and their plans to go to the dance. Justin didn't miss the chance to make his intentions known, assuring her that he would dance with her even if it made Gerald angry. Virginia recounted how Justin's arrogant behavior escalated when he showed up at the dance club and intentionally disrespected Gerald. The situation reached a climax when Justin asked Virginia to dance, which forced Gerald to give her an ultimatum. As Virginia recounted the events of that night, her eyes filled with tears. She was expressing emotional shock at what had happened on the dance floor, where Justin's actions were clearly intended to provoke Gerald and create a rift in their relationship, hoping that Virginia would sincerely turn to him for comfort in the chaos he had created. When the waitress came over, Gerald took the lead in ordering drinks and surprised me by paying the bill before leaving. It felt as if my entire family life had flashed before my eyes. Virginia began talking about her experiences with sadness on her face, and tears came to Kathy's eyes, reflecting her emotions. Virginia insisted on continuing the conversation about her desperate attempts to contact Gerald and convince him to return. However, he was convinced that she was having an affair with Justin, and it was a heartbreaking moment. Virginia revealed that the next day her marriage seemed to be on the brink of collapse, and she was desperate for answers. Turning to her friend Andrea for help, Virginia hoped for a breakthrough. Finally, Gerald called and said he needed time. Those painful 2 weeks were the hardest for Virginia, who struggled with the fear of losing everything. When Gerald finally returned, Virginia felt she was on the verge of losing everything she valued. She talked about the importance of winning love over lust. Katie expressed her sympathy, and Virginia admitted that she still hadn't told Gerald the truth, living in constant fear that her secret would be revealed. She was grateful for her marriage, which she cherished every day, but her husband had never learned the truth and likely never would. Virginia recognized that old feelings had returned, but that didn't mean she couldn't get into that situation again. Her husband still thought everything was fine in their relationship, and that was the worst, in her opinion. Virginia reflected that if a person committed adultery once, it would probably happen again. What do you think of this story? Would it be interesting to know your opinion? Kathy asked, is it a good thing that the husband didn't find out, or is it a bad thing? The wife carefully concealed her affair and went unpunished, and that's wrong. It's a sin that should be followed by consequences. A week ago, we learned the latest news about this family. The husband found out about his wife's infidelity and did something unbelievable. If we see good activity under this video in the form of your likes and comments, we will publish the second part of the story, she added.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.